Welcome to our program. My guest today is Wilson Freeman from the Pacific Legal Foundation. Wilson, thank you for being here. Tell us, who is J.D. Haltigan and why do we care?
Okay, so J.D. Haltigan is my client. He has a PhD in psychology. He was recently associated with the University of Toronto. He's an assistant professor. He is on the academic job market. He's looking for a job at a university and putting out job applications. He's found that he's had to put in DEI diversity statements at a lot of these universities. The University of California, however, had posted a job opening in the University of California, Santa Cruz, which would have been a good fit for JD, but the DEI statement requirement in the University of California system, and particularly at UC Santa Cruz, is really demanding. They have DEI statement requirement. They make clear in the application that applicants' DEI statements will be reviewed before any of their qualifications, only alongside their research statement. So before any of their credentials or previous work comes into play, search committees just look at the DEI statement. In addition, UC Santa Cruz provides applicants with a very detailed set of guidelines about what to say and what not to say in their DEI statements. So, for example, the DEI statement requirement at UC Santa Cruz makes clear that if you say that for example, they set out clear definitions about what they believe equity means, what they believe diversity means. These definitions, I think reasonable people could dispute these definitions, but applicants are told in no uncertain terms not to dispute these definitions. Further down, applicants who want to put in an application are provided a scoring rubric, which tells them how their DEI statement will be scored. It tells them what to say. For example, it tells them that they're expected or that they should know about the racial and ethnic makeup of their field. It tells them that they should be expected to take a personal responsibility to remediate that is to treat people differently on the basis of race. It tells them that if they say, for example, that they want to treat all people equally, that will be a very low score on the rubric. If they say, for example, that they don't necessarily agree with racial affinity groups because it might make some people feel less valued because of their race, that will give them a low score. So applicants who want to even be considered for a position at UC Santa Cruz must provide a DEI statement which complies with these requirements. We all know how competitive the academic job market is. If you even want to get your foot in the door, I mean, again, they're not even going to look at your credentials. So if you want to get your foot in the door, you need to provide a DEI statement which says these things. JD looked at this and he knew that there was simply no way that his application could be considered. JD has worked with and wants to work with people from all backgrounds. He's mentored young academics and students from all backgrounds and all races and all walks of life, but he believes in treating people equally without regard to the color of their skin. And he feels very strongly about that belief. And that belief in and of itself is disqualifying at the UC Santa Cruz, as their DEI statement rubric makes clear. So instead, what we've done is we filed a lawsuit against UC Santa Cruz representing J.D. Haltigan. I'm an attorney at the Pacific Legal Foundation, and we're challenging that DEI statement requirement as an unconstitutional affront to the First Amendment and an affront to academic freedom and free speech.
It's my understanding that DEI requirements exist at 4 campuses in the UC system: Davis, Santa Cruz, UCLA, and Berkeley. Is that correct?
I believe that DEI statements in some capacity are required throughout the UC system. I'm not 100% sure on that. I was at one point. I thought that was the case. But
it could be that I found a pilot program began at those 4 schools and now they exist at all schools.
Well, so let me be clear. The state of the DEI statement, what is required in a DEI statement varies from university to university, even within the UC system. So, I mean, at state schools in other states or in other even in other UC schools, they may not have sort of the detailed, here's what you have to say, here's what you don't have to say. And they may not impose the requirement that, well, we're only going to look at your DEI statement. We're not going to look at any of your qualifications. Those may be those aren't unique to UC Santa Cruz, but as you say, I'm pretty sure they also require that in UC Berkeley and at a couple of other UC schools. So there's variance throughout the UC system for sure. UC Santa Cruz is, in my opinion, one of the most demanding.
And the DEI criteria is used as a threshold, not a piece of the pie. It's more like for people who are.
That's right.
At certain times, like an AP test score, you have to cross the bar in order to be considered further. If you don't cross the bar, your career is basically.
Well, that's right, and they're express. I mean, they're absolutely explicit about this, and they've done the studies, they've done the work. They know what the impact of doing it this way is. They know that if they look at people's DEI statement without looking at their other aspects of their application, and they tell faculty search committees, you're only allowed to consider the DEI statement at this stage, or you're only allowed to consider the DEI statement and the research statement, then what they're going, then they've found that leads to, which is part of their goal, fewer hiring of Asian and white applicants, more hiring of Black and Latino applicants, and that's one of the University of California's goals with the DEI statement requirement. So that's what they're looking to accomplish.
That's an explicitly stated goal, is more hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. They've stated it. UC president stated it in several reports. The entire program was enacted, or the sort of the advancement of the DEI statement requirement has been in response to demands that they increase the proportion of minority representation in faculty. I mean, you have to understand, University of California has long required something which I might call a diversity statement. This goes back to 2004. University of California was requiring applicants to say something about what they think of diversity, or rather, are they able to treat all students equally? Questions like that would have been part of the application. That's not necessarily a problem. There's nothing wrong with University of California making sure that professors, can work in a diverse environment. But that's well in the past in terms of what the DEI statement requirement actually imposes on applicants. They're not just being asked if they can treat people fairly or if they can, give people equal opportunity. Now they're being asked to kind of affirm a set of beliefs, which you might call all wrapped up in this idea of equity and inclusion, and essentially to affirm that they believe that people should be treated differently on the basis of their race. And part of the reason for this movement towards a much more demanding DEI statement requirement, and the requirement that we look only at the DEI statement as part of the screening, is driven by the need, or the seeming desire in the UC system to not only adjust minority representation in the faculty, but also ensure that the ideology of affirmative action and the ideology of equity is propagated throughout the academy, and that it becomes orthodoxy and the sort of thing that you can't question.
The rationale for the UC system seeking diversity in faculty is because they believe, or it's been proven, that students receive instruction or feel more engaged with their instructors when that instructor is of a certain skin color.
Well, I would contest that it's been proven at all. I mean, I don't think that's the case. I don't necessarily want to get into what their rationale is for why they're trying to adjust the racial balance of the faculty, because in my opinion, it's prohibited for them to even be thinking about it that way under the United States Constitution and under the California Constitution. As you know, California Prop 209 prohibits the state government and the University of California from discriminating on the basis of race. And as the Supreme Court just stated in the Students for Fair Admission cases, universities, regardless of how noble their goals are, the Constitution requires them to treat students and faculty as individuals, not as members of a particular racial group. So, I find the entire objective to be problematic, to say the least. But here, this case is not so much focused on the equal protection question. That is just sort of in the background here. What we're focused on is the fact that the University of California is seeking to propagate this equity ideology by way of a DEI statement requirement.
So you mentioned affirmative action. You perceive the diversity requirement as it is affirmative action for faculty. I thought Prop 209 banned the use of race in admissions for students. I wasn't aware that it affected faculty hiring. This is
Prop 209. Prop 209 prohibits the entire state of California government from discriminating on the basis of race.
So
that's what it does.
So DEI is smuggling
admissions.
DEI is smuggling affirmative action into the academic setting for hiring practices, just kind of like under cover of night.
Well, I think that's one of the things that it's doing for sure. I wouldn't underestimate the importance of, again, this is a First Amendment case. I wouldn't underestimate the importance of the ideological component of this. I mean, it is absolutely true that the University of California believes that it's important to adjust the racial balance within the faculty. And they want to accomplish that with DEI. The DEI statements are one of the tools they're using to accomplish that. They're doing that not only because the use of the aggressive use of a DEI statement actually directly increases minority representation, but also because it affects the ideological makeup of the faculty and ensures that everybody within the faculty is on board with the ideological project of remaking university along a sort of racial and ethnic balancing line. At least that's how we see it.
Okay, so I think we've established that in Pacific Legal Foundation's perceptions, the word diversity means it's about race. What does equity mean in this context? Or, equity used to be a statistical value in business where you talk about equity in a house, but what does it mean when you're using it in the DEI statement criteria context? What does equity mean?
What's interesting is I wouldn't necessarily break these pieces up too much because I think they work together in concert. I don't necessarily, Pacific Legal Foundation's view, I don't think there's anything wrong with diversity per se. And even diversity as the University of California defines it in their internal documents. I mean, diversity is the variety of viewpoints, worldviews, backgrounds that students can bring to the table. I mean, if that's diversity, we have no problem with that. What the Pacific Legal Foundation generally has a problem with is racial and ethnic balancing. That is, looking at treating people not as individuals, but simply as members of a racial or ethnic group to be counted solely by way or with reference to their racial or ethnic background. So that's where we have a problem, generally speaking. Now, in this case is partially about that because the University of California disagrees. They think that it is important to treat individuals as members of a racial group. It's necessary to balance the racial, ethnic, and gender makeup of every field. And DEI, and that is what DEI writ large stands for. So I wouldn't necessarily break it into individual pieces, but instead focus on what the University of California is hoping to achieve.
Okay, so we don't want to take a stab at the word inclusion.
Well, again, I can tell you, I mean, anybody can tell you just going to the University of California website, how the University of California is purporting to define it and how they're requiring applicants to understand it. So, you and I might understand these terms in one particular way, but what makes this case so difficult, or rather not difficult for us, but what makes this case so frustrating for applicants is that it doesn't matter how you might understand these terms, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The University of California is going to impose definitions on you that you have to incorporate into your worldview if you want to be considered for a position at the university, and that violates the First Amendment. University can't, as a condition of employment at the university, impose a set of worldviews, a set of ideological beliefs that have nothing to do with the position in question. And that's what they're essentially doing here.
Let's go back to Mr. Haltigan for a moment. How does he have standing in California if he was employed at, his LinkedIn page says he was employed at University of Toronto. It has a University of Miami logo on it. I guess that's probably an alma mater.
Yeah, he got his PhD from University of Miami. He previously taught or worked at the University of Toronto. I mean, the standing in this case comes from the fact that the University of California posted job opportunity and closes that job opportunity off to anybody who doesn't comply with their ideological demands. That is, that's a First Amendment violation. The government can't post a job opportunity and then say this job opportunity is only open to individuals who believe X. That creates a First Amendment problem because the University of California is a public employer, so they're obligated to comply with the First Amendment, notwithstanding, the California Constitution, which says that they can't discriminate on the basis of race or and that the University of California is supposed to be free from political and sectarian influence. Putting that completely aside, it's a First Amendment violation for the government to post a job or for the government to leverage a job opportunity, especially in academia, to compel individuals to give up their First Amendment rights. And that's what's happening here.
And what remedy is he seeking? The abolishment of DEI criteria?
We're seeking an injunction against the DEI statement requirement in the University of California, Santa Cruz. So that wouldn't necessarily mean the end of DEI in the University of California by any means, but it would mean that they can't apply the DEI statement requirement in the way that they've been using it. And again, the way that they've been using it is with a specific rubric telling applicants what they can and can't say, and with a requirement that the DEI statement is reviewed before any application materials. So that would be the scope of our injunction would be narrow in that it would just apply to the University of California, Santa Cruz's DEI statement requirement as it exists today.
One solution that I've heard bandied about is that the university could use DEI as a piece of the pie rather than a threshold that needs to be cleared in order to continue the hiring process.
I think that would ameliorate some, but not all of our concerns. If the university stopped using the DEI statement as a threshold inquiry, then individuals like my client could at least know that they're going to be considered for the job, or at least they hope that they'll be considered. It won't be as clear that the university is telling applicants, we're not going to consider your application unless you comply with these requirements. It certainly makes it a lot more palatable, but they haven't indicated any interest in doing that.
And do DEI requirements apply across all fields, all disciplines? Is it just social sciences, humanities?
No, certainly not. The DEI statement requirement, as I understand it, is applicable across the university, and it's coming down from the administration. Now, it differs, because different components, different search committees might apply it differently. But the rubric that I talked about earlier, that is university-wide. And I believe that the desire to screen applicants on the basis of their DEI statement, I believe that's also mandated university-wide. So I have spoken to individuals in the hard sciences who are frustrated with the DEI statement requirements as well. But not everybody is as willing to sort of stick their neck out and challenge the orthodoxy.
Have you read the DEI scoring card? Have you ever looked at the boxes that they check?
I have seen the rubric, the starting rubric, but we haven't conducted discovery in this case, so I haven't necessarily seen any internal scoring sheets or anything like that. If it's not on the APO website, I haven't seen it.
I took a look at it. The scorecard, the way I remember it, or the one example that I saw, showed scoring with little bubbles 1 through 5, and they have questions like, seems uncomfortable talking about race. And I
That
just
is,
thought how impossible it is for anyone to be comfortable talking about race when their career and their job is on the line. I mean, just talking about it here in this setting, you take your life in your own hands. And I can't imagine somebody who's gone through all the work to get a PhD and then have it come down to, can they write the equivalent of a college admissions essay at the age of 40 or 45? It just must be very difficult.
it is very difficult. The University of California, I mean, what you're talking about, that's all in the rubric, right? So that's all in the starting rubric, which is used in Berkeley and it's used at UC Santa Cruz. Obviously, I think it's also used at UC Davis, maybe somewhere else as well. That rubric, is very explicit about a number of difficult questions. Yes, you have to be comfortable talking about race. You have to be comfortable knowing the demographic makeup in your particular field. You have to be comfortable talking about your personal responsibility to work to remedy what sort of the underrepresentation in your field. Underrepresentation being defined as any sort of deviation from population-wide statistics to the demographic statistics in your field. I mean, these questions, yes, they're uncomfortable, they're strange, they're difficult, and they don't have any relevance at all to your ability to actually do the job. That's the most important aspect of this. I mean, individuals who want to be an individual, we're talking about a psychology professor in our case, but I've spoken to individuals who are, for example, seeking positions working on hard science issues, fluid dynamics, cosmology, these various sort of hard science disciplines. They have to answer the same sorts of questions, and it's just so far removed from their their expertise and their focus, and it is causing the university, in my opinion, I think it inevitably will cause the university to hire less qualified candidates, because the entire purpose of it is to put your adherence to these DEI concepts and your comfort in talking about these DEI systems ahead of your qualifications. Again, they don't look at your qualifications. They look at your DEI statement. The search committees are only looking at your DEI statement in order to get past the first bar. So, of course, they're going to be hiring less qualified candidates. It's the students in the state of California who are going to suffer from this sort of thing.
Yeah, I look at my school, Cal, University of California at Berkeley. There's only one Cal. It's in Berkeley. As the premier research university probably in the world, and I just don't see how they'll be able to retain the talent, the top flight researchers, the smartest minds, if they force people to jump through these hoops that have spawned a cottage industry of people who craft DEI statements and advise on DEI statements. It's kind of like divorce before they gave divorce on demand. You have to accuse somebody of doing something, even if it was not true. It spawns like a lack of authenticity. It wastes people's time. It's
I mean, I've spoken to faculty search committees, by and large. Obviously, there are exceptions to this, but by and large, faculty search committees don't like the DEI statement requirements, which are being imposed on them on the outside by the administration, who's seeking to adjust, and further these goals that I talked about earlier. But the faculty search committees generally still want to hire the most qualified individuals. They want to hire the best researchers. They want to hire the best teachers. And the DEI statement requirement expressly puts those priorities behind DEI priorities. They're very frustrated, but it's hard to do anything about it because you have to sort of be willing to put your reputation on the line. And I mean, my client, he's coming from outside the UC system, as you observe. So it's a little bit almost easier for him because he can challenge these orthodoxies. But I've spoken to individuals inside the UC system who have real trouble. They may object to DEI statement requirements. They may object to the DEI administration at their university, but they have real trouble sort of squaring that with their desire to continue working at the university and getting along with their colleagues and getting along with the administration. And it's a very frustrating and I think difficult situation.
Yeah, it seems to me that only an outsider to the UC system can fight this, and it can only be fought in the courts. The non-tenured faculty just want to keep their head down.
Yep.
The students are dealing with their own stuff with bias reporting teams and just staying in school. The alumni, their sole means of influencing the school is to withhold donations, which isn't very effective. And so who else is going to solve it? It has to be an outsider, and it has to be done in the courts.
Frustratingly, I mean, I think you're right. That's just obviously true that the UC is not going to solve it on their own. Some states are, I think, moving away from DEI statements. I'm here in Arizona, is where I'm based, and my understanding is that the universities here are moving away from DEI statements. That doesn't seem likely in the near future in the UC system. So I agree, it has to be, at least for now, solved in the courts. I think, unfortunately, court victories can only take you so far. It has to be a cultural change. We hope to help move the ball in the right direction with cases like this one, but ultimately, it's still going to be the case at the end of the day that the same people are going to be running these DEI offices. The same people are going to be running the administration, and they're going to have much the same goals. So we have to, just continue to work and continue to push back when they cross a line. It's just not going to be the work of one day, unfortunately.
I agree with you. I think culture is the most important factor in everything we do. Everything's downstream from culture. And if
let me say one more thing about this, which is the First Amendment, I believe, stands for, and the Supreme Court believes as well, protects the idea, especially in academia, of a marketplace for ideas, and that ultimately, like, if there's free expression, the best ideas will win out in the end. I believe that is true, and I think the Supreme Court thinks that's true as well. That's the fundamental premise of the First Amendment, generally speaking. So it's really important that we win this case and that we continue to protect, and individuals continue to protect, the fundamental value of free expression and academic freedom, because those guardrails are what is ultimately going to take us out of this sort of cultural trap that we're in. Because ultimately, I think that we're in the right. And the way that we're going to win that is through the free exchange and expression of ideas.
I agree with you. Expression of ideas that result in a change in the culture. And the change in the culture will send some people packing, the kind of people who want to reformulate DEI criteria in some other way that gets around the loopholes of your hopefully successful decision.
Right. The only way that we can change the culture is to prevent the administration from doing what they want to do, which is using their power, in violation of the First Amendment, to lock out certain viewpoints that they don't like, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to use the power of the state, the power of the university administration, to push certain viewpoints out of that marketplace of ideas. And that is what we're trying to stop.
Wilson Freeman of the Pacific Legal Foundation, thank you for joining us. Thank you for time.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time as well.